You can't fix what you don't acknowledge, and you certainly can't heal from a lie that you are still actively telling. I have sat across from thousands of people in this chair, people who have committed crimes, betrayed their spouses, and destroyed their families. But every now and then, I meet someone who chills me to the bone, not because of what they did, but because of how perfectly justified they feel in having done it. They walk onto my stage with a script in their head, rehearsed and polished, believing they can outsmart the process, outsmart the audience, and frankly, outsmart me. They think this is a game of chess, and they believe they are 3 moves ahead. But what they forget is that I am not looking at the board, I am looking at the player. I am looking at the hands that are shaking while they move the pawn. I am looking at the sweat beading on their upper lip when they think the camera is off. When Sarah walked onto my stage, the first thing I noticed was how put together she was. I mean, this woman looked like she had just stepped out of a corporate catalog for success. Her hair was perfect, her suit was tailored, and she had this practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a mask. A very expensive, high-maintenance mask designed to scream competence and innocence. But I have been doing this long enough to know that the louder the presentation, the quieter the truth usually is. Sarah was here because she had been accused of something heinous in the corporate world, sabotage. Specifically, she was accused of planting incriminating evidence on a coworker's computer to get him fired, a man named Mark who had been her rival for a senior vice president position. But Sarah wasn't here to confess. Oh no, she was here to clear her name. She was here to use my platform as a megaphone to shout her innocence to the world and to paint herself as the victim of a misogynistic, cutthroat corporate culture that was trying to silence a strong woman. I watched her settle into the chair, smoothing out her skirt, checking the monitor to see how she looked. It was all performance. I turned to the audience, then back to her, and I asked her simply, "Why are you here?" It's a standard question, but the answer tells me everything. Sarah looked me dead in the eye, unblinking, and said, "Doctor, Phil, I am here because my life has been ruined by a lie, and I am tired of being the villain in a story where I am actually the only person who played by the rules." Right there, in that first sentence, she gave it away. She didn't say she was innocent. She said she played by the rules. But whose rules? Her rules? Because in her world, the rules seemed to be kill or be killed. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and looked at her. I needed to peel back this veneer. I needed to understand the architecture of her deception. You see, people don't just wake up one morning and decide to frame a colleague for federal wire fraud, which is essentially what she did. That kind of malice takes time to bake. It takes a certain kind of personality structure to look at a friend, and Mark was her friend. They had started at the firm together and decided that his destruction was a necessary cost of doing business. We started talking about the incident. The details were messy, as they always are. Confidential client data had been leaked to a competitor. The digital footprint led straight to Mark's terminal. He was fired, humiliated, and facing legal action. Sarah, coincidentally, got the promotion the next week. It was neat, it was tidy, it was too perfect. I asked her about Mark. I wanted to hear how she described him. Usually, if someone is falsely accused, they have some empathy for the other person involved, or at least some confusion. Sarah had none. She spoke of him with a cold, clinical detachment. She called him sloppy. She said he was distracted. She said Mark was a nice guy, Dr. Phil, but he didn't have the killer instinct. He wasn't built for the pressure. I think he leaked that data because he wanted a way out, and he just got caught. That phrase stuck with me, killer instinct. I stopped her there. I said, Sarah, you talk about business like it's war. You talk about your colleagues like they are enemy combatants. Is that how you see the world? Is everyone either a stepping stone or a stumbling block? She didn't flinch. She crossed her legs and tilted her head, giving me a look that was almost pitying. Dr. Phil, she said, her voice dropping an octave, sounding almost reasonable, we live in a competitive world. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. I worked 80 hours a week for 5 years. I sacrificed my marriage. I sacrificed having children. I gave that company everything. Mark went home at 5 o'clock to play with his kids. Why should he get the seat at the table just because he's a nice guy? This was the opening I was looking for. This was the entitlement. This was the cognitive distortion that allowed her to justify the unjustifiable. In her mind, the promotion was hers by right of suffering. Because she had suffered more, because she had sacrificed more, she deserved the reward, regardless of merit or performance. And anyone who stood in her way wasn't just a rival, they were a thief stealing what belonged to her. This is a classic narcissistic narrative. The narcissist believes they are special, unique, and entitled to special treatment. When reality doesn't align with that belief, they don't adjust their belief, they try to adjust reality. And that's what Sarah did. She tried to rewrite reality to fit the script where she is the winner. I decided to pivot to her background. We always have to look at the backstory because we aren't born with these defense mechanisms. We learn them. We forge them in the fires of our childhood. I asked about her father. I had done my homework. My team is thorough. I knew her father was a high-powered attorney, a man who had never lost a case, a man who viewed vulnerability as a disease. When I brought him up, Sarah's demeanor shifted. The polished executive cracked just a fraction. Her hand went to her necklace, a nervous tick. My father was a great man, she said, but the words were rote. He taught me the value of excellence. He taught you that love was conditional, didn't he? I asked gently. He taught you that you were only as good as your last win. She looked away, staring into the middle distance. He had high standards. There is nothing wrong with high standards. There is when those standards are impossible to meet, I countered. There is when the price of failure is emotional exile. I'm betting that in your house, if you came home with a 98 on a test, the first question wasn't good job, it was what happened to the other 2 points. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Exactly. And that's why I'm successful. That's why I'm a VP at 32. But at what cost, Sarah? I asked. You're a VP. But you're here on my stage because the FBI is looking at your hard drive. You're here because your husband left you. You're here because you have no friends left in that office. You have won everything, and yet you have nothing. How is that working for you? It's the question I always come back to because it cuts through the rhetoric. It forces the guest to look at the results, not the intentions. Sarah stiffened. She didn't like being challenged on the outcome. She wanted to argue the process. She wanted to argue that she was right, that the world was wrong. But I wasn't going to let her debate the philosophy of success. I wanted to talk about the mechanics of the betrayal. I brought up the timeline of the data breach. I had the forensic reports. I had the emails. I knew things she didn't know I knew. That's the advantage of sitting in this chair. I let her spin her yarn for a while longer. I let her talk about how she found the discrepancy in the logs, how she tried to protect Mark initially but had to do her duty. She was weaving a complex web, adding details that weren't necessary, which is a hallmark of lying. Truthful people tell you what happened. Liars tell you a story. They add color and dialogue and emotional context to sell the lie. Sarah was selling hard. She told a story about a lunch conversation where Mark supposedly confessed he was in debt. She described his sweating, his nervousness. It was a vivid picture. That's a very detailed memory for something that happened 6 months ago, I noted. I have a photographic memory, she shot back. It's one of my assets. Is it? I paused because I spoke to Mark, and I spoke to the waiter at that restaurant, and I spoke to the bank regarding Mark's finances. Mark wasn't in debt. He has a trust fund. Mark wasn't sweating. The waiter said you two were laughing and drinking iced tea. And Mark claims that lunch never happened on that date because he was at a dental appointment for which he has a receipt. Sarah blinked. The mask slipped. For a second, just a second, I saw the panic. It was a raw, primal fear. But then the defense mechanism kicked back in. Denial, attack. They're lying, she said, her voice turning hard. Mark bought that receipt. He has money, like you said. He's paying people off to frame me. So now it's a conspiracy, I ask? First it was him being sloppy. Now it's a coordinated effort to frame you? Which is it, Sarah? Because truth doesn't change. Truth is the only thing that doesn't need a good memory. But lies, you have to juggle them. And right now, you are dropping balls all over this stage. I could feel the audience turning. They had been unsure at the start. She was very convincing, but now they were sensing the rot. They could smell the desperation. But Sarah wasn't done. She dug her heels in. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and defiance. She wasn't going to go down without a fight. She had come here to win, and in her mind, admitting she lied was a death sentence. It was worse than prison. It was failure. And her father didn't raise a failure. I knew we were approaching the tipping point, the point where the pressure of the lie becomes greater than the fear of the truth. I needed to push her there. I needed to get her to say the thing she was hiding. Not just that she did it, but why she did it. There was a specific venom in this act, a personal element that went beyond just professional rivalry. I had a hunch. I had read the text messages between her and Mark from years ago. There was a dynamic there that she wasn't admitting to. Sarah, I said, dropping my voice, making it intimate, cutting out the audience. Let's stop the legal talk. Let's stop the corporate buzzwords. I want to talk about you and Mark. I want to talk about what really happened between you two. Because you don't destroy a person like this just for a job. You can get another job. This was personal. This was a punishment. What did he do to you? Did he reject you? Did he make you feel small? Her eyes widened. I had hit a nerve. The color drained from her face. Silence on a stage like mine is heavy. It has weight, it has texture, and it has a temperature. When I asked Sarah if Mark had rejected her, the temperature in that studio dropped 10 degrees. For a woman who had an answer for everything, a woman who had a rehearsed, corporate-approved rebuttal for every accusation of fraud and sabotage, she suddenly had nothing. Her mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut. Her eyes, which had been laser-focused on me like I was a hostile witness in a deposition, suddenly darted to the left, then to the floor. That is a tell. In poker, you call it a fold. In psychology, we call it a cognitive break. The narrative she had constructed, the one where she was the warrior queen fighting the patriarchy, didn't account for personal humiliation. It didn't account for a bruised ego. That is ridiculous. She finally spat out, but the cool professional cadence was gone. Her voice was shrill. This isn't a soap opera, Dr. Phil. This is a Fortune 500 company. We are professionals. I don't mix business with whatever that implies. I'm not implying anything, I said, leaning back in my chair, keeping my voice low and steady. I am stating a hypothesis based on behavior. You see, Sarah, behavior is a language. And your behavior towards Mark changed overnight? I have the timeline right here. For 3 years, you two were inseparable. You were the dynamic duo. You shared clients, you shared lunches, you texted about everything from market trends to your favorite takeout. And then, on the weekend of November 14th, during the company retreat in Aspen, the communication stopped. Cold, dead silence. When you came back that Monday, the sabotage began. The complaints to HR started. The subtle digs and meetings started. So I have to ask myself, what happened in Aspen? She shifted in her seat, crossing her arms tightly across her chest, a defensive posture, protecting the vital organs. Nothing happened. I realized he wasn't pulling his weight. I realized I was carrying him. I woke up. You woke up, I repeated. Or did you get a wake-up call? Because I have a statement here from a bartender at the hotel lodge. He remembers that night very clearly. He remembers you and Mark having a very intense conversation at the bar. He remembers you crying, and he remembers Mark walking away, leaving you there. He was drunk, she shouted, pointing a finger at me. He was belligerent. I was trying to calm him down. That's funny, I said, flipping a page on my clipboard, because the bartender said Mark was drinking club soda, you were the one drinking double scotches. And when Mark walked away, he went straight to his room and called his wife. We have the phone records. He talked to her for an hour. He didn't sound drunk, and he didn't sound belligerent. He sounded, according to his wife, relieved. He told her he had finally set some boundaries with a coworker who was getting too intense. That coworker was you, Sarah, wasn't it? The audience let out a collective gasp. This is the moment where the abstract becomes real for them. It wasn't just about computer files anymore. It was about obsession. Sarah's face turned a blotchy red. She looked like she wanted to run, but she knew the cameras would follow her. She was trapped in the chair, trapped by the truth she had spent 6 months trying to bury. He is a liar, she hissed. He led me on. He used me to get ahead, used my ideas, used my connections, and then when he thought he didn't need me anymore, he tried to discard me like I was nothing. I didn't frame him, Dr. Phil. I exposed him. I showed the world who he really was. And to do that, I interjected, you had to become something worse. You talk about him using you, but let's look at what you did. You accessed his terminal. You didn't just find evidence, you created it. I want to show you something. I signaled to the control room. On the giant screen behind us, a grainy black and white video began to play. It was security footage from the office hallway. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. The office was dark, deserted. Then a figure appeared. It was Sarah. There was no mistaking the silhouette, the walk, even the coat she was wearing. She walked up to a cubicle, Mark's cubicle, and sat down. The light from the monitor illuminated her face. She was there for 45 minutes. You told the police, I said, turning back to her, that you were at home that night. You provided a sworn affidavit stating you were asleep. You even had your sister lie and say she was with you. But cameras don't have sisters, and cameras don't lie. That is you, Sarah, at Mark's desk. 2 days before the leak was discovered, what were you doing there at 2 a.m? Sarah stared at the screen. For a long time, she didn't speak. She couldn't deny it was her. The image was irrefutable. But the mind of someone this deep in deception is a fascinating engine. It doesn't stop, it reroutes. I could practically hear the gears grinding, looking for a new angle, a new justification. I was working, she said finally, her voice trembling but gaining strength. I went to check his files. I already suspected him. I was looking for proof. That's not a crime, Dr. Phil. That's due diligence. I knew he was leaking data. I went there to find it, and I found it. You found it? Or you planted it? I pressed. Because the IT forensics team found that the files were uploaded to the external server during that exact 45-minute window from that terminal. While you were sitting in that chair, are you telling me that a ghost came in and did it while you were sitting there checking his work? Someone else could have remote accessed it, she grasped. He could have set a timer. You don't understand how these systems work. I understand how people work, I said. And I know that when you have to invent a conspiracy theory that involves remote timers, invisible hackers, and a worldwide plot against you just to explain why you were sitting at a man's desk at 2 a.m., you are running out of runway. Sarah, look at me. She refused. She kept her eyes glued to the monitor, staring at her own ghostly image as if she could will it out of existence. You are so angry, I observed. You are filled with so much rage that it is eating you alive. You felt humiliated in Aspen. You felt small. And in your world, the only way to stop feeling small is to make the other person disappear. You didn't just want Mark fired. You wanted him destroyed. You wanted to take his reputation, his livelihood, his dignity. You wanted him to feel the powerlessness that you felt that night at the bar. Is that a win, Sarah? Is destroying a father of three a victory? He deserved it, she screamed. The silence that followed that outburst was absolute. She had finally said it. Not I didn't do it, not it's a mistake, but he deserved it. She clamped her hand over her mouth, realizing too late what had slipped out. The mask had shattered completely. The polished executive was gone, replaced by a wounded, vindictive child lashing out. There it is, I said softly, the truth. Finally, you appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner. You decided he deserved to lose everything because he bruised your ego. That is a dangerous way to live, Sarah. Because when you start rationalizing destruction as justice, you lose your soul. You lose the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. And let me tell you, the law doesn't care about your feelings. The FBI doesn't care that he was mean to you in Aspen. They care about wire fraud. They care about corporate espionage. You are looking at 10 years in federal prison. Is your pride worth 10 years of your life? She began to cry. But it wasn't the crying of remorse. It was the crying of frustration. It was the crying of a child who has been caught with their hand in the cookie jar and is angry at the parent for turning on the light. She was crying for herself. I worked so hard, she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I gave everything to that company. They never appreciated me. Mark was mediocre. He was average. Why should he have it all? It's not fair. Life isn't fair, I told her. But we make choices. And you chose to become a criminal instead of accepting that you can't control everything and everyone. You have a distorted view of entitlement. You think because you work hard, the rules don't apply to you. You think because you're smart, you can outsmart morality. But you can't. Morality is the one thing that catches up to everyone eventually. And today, it caught up to you. I paused, letting the reality sink in. We were at a crossroads now. I had the confession, essentially. She had admitted the motive and placed herself at the scene emotionally. But we weren't done. Because acknowledging you did it is one thing, understanding why you are the kind of person who could do it is another. And if we didn't get to the why, she would just go out and do it again to someone else. Sarah, I said, I want to bring someone out here. Someone who has been watching this from backstage, someone you probably didn't expect to see. Her head snapped up, fear replacing the anger in her eyes. Who? Your father, I said. The color didn't just leave her face, it vanished. She looked like she might faint. The man she had spent her entire life trying to impress, the man whose impossible standards had forged this steel trap of a personality, was here. And he had just watched her admit to being a fraud. This was the one confrontation she wasn't prepared for. This was the source of the infection. "No," she whispered. He can't be here. He's busy." "He made time," I said, "because even he knows that this is the end of the line." When I said her father was backstage, Sarah didn't just look scared, she looked small. For the last 40 minutes, I had been dealing with a corporate shark, a woman who wielded power like a blunt instrument. But in that split second, the shark vanished, and I saw a terrified 6-year-old girl waiting for a report card inspection. It confirmed everything I suspected about the root of her pathology. We are all products of our environment, and Sarah was a product of a high-pressure, zero-sum environment where affection was currency and she was currently bankrupt. I signaled the stage manager, and the doors opened. An older man walked out. He was tall, imposing, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He walked with a stiff, military bearing. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Sarah. There was no warmth in his eyes, just a cold, analytical disappointment. He sat down in a chair next to her, not too close, maintaining a distinct physical gap. "Hello, Richard," I said. "Thank you for joining us." He nodded curtly. "Dr. Phil." I turned to Sarah. She was staring at her lap, her hands wringing together so hard her knuckles were white. She couldn't even look him in the face. That dynamic alone spoke volumes. "Richard, you've been listening backstage. You heard your daughter admit that she felt Mark deserved to be destroyed. You saw the footage of her at his desk at 2 a.m. What is going through your mind right now?" Richard cleared his throat. "I am disappointed," he said, the word landing like a gavel strike. "We raised Sarah to be a winner, to be a leader. This behavior, this is sloppy. It is beneath her." Notice that? He didn't say it was wrong. He didn't say it was immoral. He said it was sloppy. He said it was beneath her. He was critiquing her technique, not her ethics. Sloppy. I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Richard, your daughter is facing federal charges. She framed an innocent man. She destroyed a family's peace of mind. And your concern is that her execution was flawed? In our family, we don't make mistakes," Richard said, his voice flat. "If you are going to play the game, you play to win, but you don't get caught. Getting caught is a sign of weakness. It shows a lack of planning." I turned to the audience, pointing a thumb at Richard. "Are you hearing this? This is the water she swam in. This is the air she breathed. Don't get caught. Not don't do it. Not be a good person. Just don't show weakness." I swiveled back to Sarah. "Sarah, look at your father. Is this what you've been chasing your whole life? This approval? Because let me tell you something, you are never going to get it. Not the way you want it. You could be the CEO of the world, and if you tripped on the way to the podium, he would critique your balance." Sarah looked up, tears streaming down her face now, ruining the perfect makeup. "I just wanted you to be proud of me, Daddy," she whispered. It was heartbreaking. A 32-year-old woman calling him Daddy in a moment of complete devastation. Richard looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, his expression softened, but then the walls went back up. "I am proud of success, Sarah. I am proud of competence. This spectacle is humiliating." "Humiliating for whom?" I asked sharply. "For her or for you? Because that's what this is really about, isn't it, Richard? Her failure reflects on you. You're not worried about her soul, you're worried about your brand. Richard stiffened. I am a respected man in my community. My name means something, and right now, your name is attached to a felony, I said bluntly. But here is the tragedy, Richard. You created this. You built this machine. You taught her that people are disposable. You taught her that empathy is a liability. You stripped the humanity out of her to make her a winner, and now you're surprised that she acted like a machine? You can't program a robot to kill and then be upset when it misfires. I leaned in closer to Sarah. You see that? He's worried about his reputation. He's not holding your hand. He's not asking if you're okay. He's checking the damage to his own ego. Sarah, you have to stop running on this hamster wheel. You are trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No amount of promotions, no amount of money, no amount of winning against Mark or anyone else is ever going to make you feel enough for him. Because the problem isn't your performance. The problem is his inability to love you unconditionally. Sarah let out a sob that sounded like something breaking deep inside her chest. But if I'm not successful, who am I? That is the million-dollar question, I said. And until you can answer that, you are dangerous to yourself, and you are dangerous to others. Because you will burn down the world just to keep warm. You tried to burn down Mark's life because you thought his success diminished yours. You thought if you blew out his candle, yours would shine brighter. But that's not how physics works, and it's sure not how life works. I stood up and walked over to the monitors again. I wanted to shift the focus back to the victim for a moment. We couldn't lose sight of the real damage here. Sarah, I want you to listen to this audio recording. I said, this is a voicemail Mark left for his wife the day he was fired. I want you to hear the fear in his voice. I played the tape. The room filled with the sound of a man on the edge of a breakdown. Honey, I don't know what happened. They escorted me out. They took my badge. They said I stole data. I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. How are we going to pay the mortgage? What am I going to tell the kids? I feel like I'm going crazy. Maybe I did do it and I don't remember. Is that possible? Am I losing my mind? The raw panic in his voice was palpable. He was gaslighting himself. Sarah's manipulation had been so effective that the victim was questioning his own sanity. I stopped the tape. That is what you did, I said quietly. You made a sane man question his reality. You made a father wonder how he would feed his children. And you did it while sitting in your office, ordering lunch, and planning your victory lap. Richard, does that sound like sloppy execution to you? Or does that sound like cruelty? Richard remained silent, staring at the floor. He had no defense for that. Even his cold logic couldn't justify the visceral sound of another man's suffering. Sarah, I continued sitting back down. You are at a precipice. You can keep lying. You can keep trying to impress this man who sees you as an asset rather than a daughter. You can go to trial, spend millions on defense, and likely end up in prison anyway, bitter and alone. Or you can stop. You can get off the wheel. You can admit that you are broken. You can admit that you need help. Not business coaching, not legal advice. You need psychological help to deprogram 30 years of toxic conditioning. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know how to stop, she said. I don't know how to be anything else. That is the most honest thing you have said all day, I told her. And that is where we start. You don't know how to be anything else because you've never been allowed to be just Sarah. You've always had to be Sarah the winner, Sarah the VP, Sarah the prodigy. Well, right now, you are just Sarah the human being. And Sarah, the human being, made a terrible mistake. But you are still breathing. You are still here. You can fix this. But fixing it doesn't mean winning the case. Fixing it means owning the truth. I turned to Richard. And you, sir, you have a choice too. You can walk out of here and disown her to protect your precious reputation, or you can finally act like a father. You can tell her that you love her even if she goes to jail. You can tell her that she is worth more than her resume. Can you do that? Do you even have it in you? Richard looked at his daughter. The silence stretched out agonizingly long. The audience held its breath. This was the moment. The escalation was over. We were in the confrontation now, the deep, ugly, beautiful confrontation with the core wound. Richard's jaw worked. He looked at the cameras, then at me, then finally at Sarah. He reached out hesitantly and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was stiff, awkward, like he was touching a foreign object. You are my daughter, he said, his voice gruff. We will handle this. We will get the best lawyers. I sighed. He still didn't get it. He was still trying to fix the problem, not the person. He was still reaching for the checkbook instead of his heart. Richard, I said, shaking my head, she doesn't need a lawyer right now. She needs a dad. She needs you to say, it's okay not to be perfect. Can you say that? He looked trapped. The programming was too deep. I can't lie to her, Dr. Phil. It is not okay to not be perfect. The world eats imperfect people. There it was. The tragic worldview passed down from generation to generation. He truly believed he was protecting her by demanding perfection. He believed love was a weakness that would get her eaten. Sarah pulled away from his hand. She looked at him with a sudden, devastating clarity. The illusion had shattered. She saw him not as a God to be appeased, but as a flawed, frightened old man who was just as trapped as she was. He can't say it, Sarah said, her voice hollow. He can't say it because he doesn't believe it. You're right, Dr. Phil. I've been running a race that has no finish line. I destroyed Mark because I was terrified that if I lost, I would lose him. She pointed at her father. But I never had him. I never had you, did I, Dad? I just had your expectations. She stood up. It was a shaky movement, but she stood. She turned to the camera, looking directly into the lens. I did it, she said. Her voice was stronger now. I framed Mark. I planted the files. I lied to the police. I lied to everyone. I was jealous, and I was petty, and I was scared. And I am so sorry. The studio was dead silent. A confession on national television. It was rare and it was powerful. She wasn't doing it for the audience. She was doing it to cut the cord. She was severing the tie to her father's approval by committing the ultimate sin in his eyes, admitting defeat publicly. When Sarah looked into that camera and confessed, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just the legal implications, though those were massive. It was the energy. The tension that had been winding tighter and tighter for the last hour suddenly snapped. She had let go. She had dropped the rope in the tug-of-war she had been playing with reality, and her father, he looked like he had been slapped. He sat there, frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. His daughter, his creation, had just committed social suicide in his eyes. But to me, she had just taken her first breath of real air. Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice soft but firm. That took courage, real courage. Not the kind you use in a boardroom to bully someone, but the kind it takes to look in the mirror and say, this is who I am, and it's not pretty. She slumped back into her chair, exhausted, the adrenaline was fading, and the reality was setting in. What happens now? She asked, her voice trembling again. Now? I leaned forward. Now the real work begins. You've admitted the what? Now we have to deal with the mess. You have to make this right. And I don't mean just serving time. I mean restitution. You have to give Mark his life back. You have to go to the authorities officially, and you have to clear his name completely. You have to pay for his legal fees. You have to apologize to his wife, to his children. You have to be the one to tell the world that he is innocent and you are the one who failed. She nodded slowly. I will. I want to. And then I continued, you have to figure out who Sarah is without the job title, because you're going to lose that job. You're going to lose the career you built. And if your entire identity is wrapped up in your business card, you are going to disintegrate. We need to find the person underneath the ambition. I turned back to Richard. He was staring at the floor, unable to look at his daughter. He looked deflated, smaller than when he walked in. Richard, I said, your daughter just saved her own life. She might be going to prison, but she just broke out of the prison you built for her. You have a choice now. You can walk away and leave her to face this alone, staying safe in your tower of perfection. Or you can stay, you can sit with her in the mess. You can learn that love isn't about celebrating victories, it's about holding someone when they've lost everything. Richard looked up. His eyes were wet. For the first time, the facade cracked completely. I don't know how, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to do that. My father we didn't do that. Well, maybe it's time to break the cycle, I said. Maybe it's time to stop passing down the poison. You're not dead yet, Richard. You can learn, but you have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to be sloppy with your emotions. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, not as a reflection of himself, but as a separate, suffering human being. He reached out again, and this time he took her hand. He squeezed it. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was contact. It was a start. I'm here, he said gruffly. We'll figure it out. Sarah squeezed back, tears flowing freely again. It was a small moment, but in a family like theirs, it was a seismic shift. I turned to the audience. This is what it comes down to, folks. We live in a world that rewards the image, the hustle, the win. We are taught to filter our lives, to curate our success, and to hide our failures. And when we do that, we create monsters. We create people who are so terrified of being seen as ordinary that they will destroy anyone who threatens their illusion of extraordinary. Sarah's story is a warning. It's a warning about what happens when you value achievement over character, when you value validation over connection. I paused, letting the message land. But it's also a story about redemption, not the Hollywood kind where everything is fixed in the end. Sarah is going to face serious consequences. She is going to have a hard road. But she has taken the first step towards something she has never had: authenticity. She is finally standing on solid ground. It's rocky ground, it's painful ground, but it's real, and you can build a life on reality. You can't build a life on a lie. We took a break then. Backstage, the atmosphere was subdued. My producers were scrambling, coordinating with legal teams, making sure we had the waivers, the statements. Sarah was sitting in the green room with her father. They weren't talking much, but they were sitting together. That was progress. I went in to see them for a moment before we wrapped. Sarah, I said, standing in the doorway, you did the right thing. Don't let the fear take it back. When you walk out of here, the lawyers are going to tell you to shut up. They are going to tell you to recant. Don't listen to them. Listen to that voice that spoke up on stage. That's your conscience. It's been dormant for a long time, but it's awake now. Keep it awake. She looked up at me, her eyes tired but clear. I feel lighter, she said. I feel like I've been carrying a backpack full of rocks for 20 years, and I just set it down. That's the weight of the lie, I nodded. It's heavy, and you don't have to carry it anymore. I looked at Richard. Take care of her, I said. Not her reputation. Her, he nodded. A solemn, humbled movement. I will try. We went back out for the final segment. I wanted to close the loop on Mark. We had reached out to him during the break. He didn't want to come on the show, smart man, but he had sent a statement through his attorney. I wanted to read it on air. We have a statement from Mark, I announced to the audience. He says, I am watching. I am in shock. For 6 months, I have lived in a nightmare. I have lost my job, my savings, and almost lost my family. Hearing the truth today is a relief I cannot describe. I don't know if I can forgive Sarah yet. That will take time. But I am grateful that the truth is out. Now, maybe I can finally sleep. I looked at Sarah. You hear that? I don't know if I can forgive. That is honest. You can't expect forgiveness just because you confessed. You have to earn it, and you might never get it. And that's okay. Your journey now isn't about getting him to forgive you. It's about becoming a person who wouldn't do this again. She nodded. I understand. This is the outcome, I said to the camera. We didn't fix everything today. We didn't wave a magic wand. Sarah is leaving here to go meet with the FBI. Her father is leaving here to grapple with a lifetime of parenting mistakes. Mark is at home trying to rebuild his life from the rubble. There is no happy ending here yet, but there is a true beginning. And that's what we do here. We strip away the varnish, we tear down the walls, and we find the truth. Because as I always say, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. I stood up and walked over to Sarah one last time. I shook her hand. It was firm, no longer shaking. Good luck, I said. Thank you, Dr. Phil, she replied. As the credits rolled, I watched them walk off the stage. They walked slowly, side by side. Not the power couple of father and daughter they had pretended to be, but two broken people limping towards the exit. It wasn't triumphant, it was sober. It was real. And that's the thing about these stories. The villain isn't always a monster under the bed. Sometimes the villain is just a scared kid in a tailored suit trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. Sarah was a perpetrator, yes. She did terrible things. But she was also a victim of a toxic definition of success. Unraveling that knot takes time. I sat back in my chair as the audience applauded. I thought about the thousands of people out there just like Sarah, people climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls, people hurting others to protect their fragile egos. I hope they were watching. I hope they saw that the fall is inevitable, but the landing is up to you. You can crash and burn, or you can land on your feet and start walking in a different direction. Sarah chose to walk. It's going to be a long walk to redemption. She's going to have to face the music in court. She's going to have to look Mark in the eye. She's going to have to rebuild her relationship with her father from scratch. But for the first time in her life, she's walking in her own shoes, not the ones her father picked out for her. And that, in my book, is a breakthrough. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's the truth. And the truth is the only place where healing can start.